Welcome everyone to the first episode of Hot Topics on Air, dedicated to COVID-19 vaccination and liver disease. We are live in Brussels, and today we will address some questions that arise straight from the liver patients community to some of the most prominent representatives in the field. But before introducing you, our today's guest, let me give the floor to Marco Korenjak, the President of the European Liver Patients Association.
And an honor to be among you today. So COVID-19 infection may result in significant and devastating delays in screening, diagnosis, treatment, monitoring, surveillance strategies in patients with liver diseases, liver cancer, and rare liver diseases. Vaccination is so far the best response to COVID-19, and it's the main road to manage this pandemic successfully. However, during these last months, European Liver Patient Association, we realized that there is an urgent need for more information on the topic of COVID-19 vaccination and also patients with liver cancer and rare liver diseases. We are also aware that patient associations should educate and instill confidence among the public and patients in receiving the vaccine and provide them with up-to-date information in lay language. These are the main reasons why European Liver Patient Association, we decided to organize this hot topic episode. I hope that you will enjoy, and please, if you have any questions, write them down and we will try to answer live or get back to you after the end of the episode.
Further ado, please welcome Professor Jeffrey Lazarus, Barcelona Institute for Global Health Hospital Clinic, University of Barcelona, and Dr. Lyudmila Mosina, Technical Specialist, Vaccine Preventable Diseases and Immunization, Division of Health Emergencies and Communicable Diseases, World Health Organization, Europe. Professor Lazarus, the first set of questions is for you. Let's start with the mother of all questions. Did we undermine the vaccine's safety because it was done so fast and without long-term studies?
Regarding the long-term, the rapid development of the vaccine, and the efficacy, yes. Well, these vaccines went through all of the regular procedures of any vaccine in development. The way they were able to move so quickly was that regulatory bodies carried out a rolling review. So rather than waiting for a trial to completely finish and then submitting the paperwork, the regulatory bodies were working with the companies developing the vaccines to review the papers on that kind of rolling basis. They were also able to move very quickly from phase 2 into phase 3. Another challenge in vaccine trials is finding enough participants. That was not the problem in the case of developing the COVID-19 vaccines. So many of the processes that take many years, including the financing, were able to be shortened so greatly that we were able to develop highly efficacious vaccines in a short amount of time without undermining or any of the efficacy or safety processes that are in place. And that's why it's been, most of the vaccines have been approved by the European Medical Agency, by the FDA, by the UK regulatory agency.
Professor Lazarus, what does 90% efficacious mean and how this has been calculated?
Yeah. So firstly, when a vaccine is 90% efficacious, 90% is very high, but that's a calculation that's done of how the vaccine is working in the vaccine trial. So in a controlled clinical setting, it works at 90% of the cases. What we need to think about is, what is the effectiveness? The effectiveness is the vaccine in the real world. And typically the effectiveness will be lower than the efficacy rates we see in the trial. We're hoping that it will only be a little bit lower, but the effectiveness will be slightly lower. The other thing to consider with the COVID-19 vaccines is that they're not preventing transmission of the virus. They're preventing the onset of severe symptoms. They're also preventing having a high viral load, which will help reduce transmission. But just by being vaccinated does not mean that you cannot acquire SARS-CoV-2.
What about side effects? Should a person with one or more illnesses be more worried about them?
So, I mean, before anyone gets vaccinated, their clinician will take the decision, but in the vast number of cases, everyone is able to be vaccinated. And what we've seen from the vaccines that are being approved across Europe, in the US and the UK, is that there are very few side effects, no major side effects, and certainly no more side effects than other vaccines. So these are considered very safe and, as mentioned, highly efficacious vaccines.
Can you explain the vaccine prioritization? How are countries determining who should get vaccinated and when?
So regarding prioritization, countries have slight differences among them, but in general, the priority has been for the oldest population, the population that's most vulnerable and the population that we've seen the highest rates of mortality in. So we're starting with those over 1880, going to those over 70 or maybe 65, and then going down to 60 and so on. At the same time, the priority is on frontline healthcare professionals, so those who are seeing patients, those in emergency rooms and hospitals and clinics. So your goal really is to get your healthcare system, the frontline healthcare professionals protected, the elderly population, and then move into the rest of the population. And this has been the prioritization in the high-income countries, Europe, the US, etc. We also need to look at the prioritization of the vaccine more globally in terms of global equity. We can't just protect high-income countries and expect to get out of this pandemic. That's why there are discussions about getting the vaccines quickly now to low-income countries as soon as the very most vulnerable populations in high-income countries are vaccinated. And that's certainly now the case in the UK, and there were recent declarations at the G7 meeting by Prime Minister Johnson and others about making sure that vaccines start to reach the low-income countries. But we really need to scale that up and work through the global facility COVAX.
Professor Lazarus, a last final question from a Facebook user. If I have already have COVID-19 and recovered, do I still need to get vaccinated with a COVID-19 vaccine?
You will need to still get the vaccine. The question is, how long until you get vaccinated? So that will be a decision in the country, depending on their prioritization and with the particular clinician. So as we're trying to get a first dose, which even the first dose is highly efficacious, but in those vaccines that need 2 doses, which is right now the majority that are approved, we want to get that first dose to as many people as possible. And there might be a decision that if you recently had COVID-19, that you should wait a few months, but that will depend on the particular situation. There's no sort of blanket recommendation that from the last day of having COVID-19, you wait X number of days.
Thank you, Professor Lazarus. This was a great start, but this is only the beginning. Current models predict that there will not be enough vaccines to cover the world's population until 2023 or 2024. Dr. Mosina, as representative of an international organization such as the World Health Organization, will poorer countries have delayed access to vaccination?
Very much for this question, and global access to COVID-19 vaccines, including in countries that have low income or middle income economies, has been of particular importance of WHO. And probably you have heard that WHO and the European Commission in France launched the Access to COVID-19 Tools, which is called AST Accelerator, in response to the pandemic. And the main goal of this collaboration is to bring together governments and global health organizations and manufacturers, scientists, private sectors, civil society, philanthropy, with the aim to provide access to COVID-19 diagnostic treatments and vaccines. And COVAX is one of the 3 pillars of this AST, and it's aimed to ensure that people in all countries in the world will get access to COVID-19 vaccines. And up to today, we have 180 countries and territories all around of the world engaged in this COVAX facility. And these countries and territories accounts over 90% of world's population. And the COVAX facility already have 2 vaccines that are pre-qualified by WHO, and plans aims to end the acute phase of pandemic globally by delivering 2 billion doses of safe and efficacious vaccine, and on a global, fair and equitable basis by the end of 2021. And COVAX goal is to begin rolling out vaccines to countries aiming for February or early March, and to supply vaccine to each participating country to cover the highest priority population, and in the first of the year, half of the year, and then building towards the goal of protecting at least 20% each of the population in each country by the end of 2021. And the important note is that all these vaccines can arrive to the country after country demonstrate readiness of including legal agreements with manufacturers or indemnifications and liability.
Some vaccine delivery delays have hit the news recently. Are vaccination producers putting profits over public health?
Yes, as predicted, the demand for vaccine is far greater than supply at this early stage, and the sheer scale of vaccine rollout is enormous, and so are the challenges, and vaccine production and rollout will take time, and all have a role to play in making this rollout as equitable as possible. And as I already told, that WHO with the partners undertakes tremendous effort to make this vaccine available to low and middle income countries and through this COVAX facility.
As more vaccines come to market, who will decide who gets which vaccine, both internationally and within countries?
With regards to allocation of vaccine between countries, in consultation with member states and ICT partners, WHO has developed a fair allocation mechanism for COVID-19 vaccines through the COVAX facility. And this is a strategy to rapidly contain the pandemic, save lives, protect healthcare system, and restore global economies based on the human rights principle of equity and epidemiological evidence from the pandemic. And the main principle is that all countries should receive doses in proportion to their population size to immunize the highest priority groups. And this is the main principle which will be applied in phase 1 of COVAX vaccine, of supply of vaccine within COVAX facility to cover up to 20% of population. So countries will not receive any more doses vaccine unless all of them receive vaccines to cover up to 20% of population. And in the stage 2, when the vaccine will be supplied to cover population beyond 20%, there will be judgment done depending on availability of vaccine. Vaccine can be continued equally distributed to the country according to a proportion of population. And if there will be any vaccines supply constraint, then this allocation mechanism may prioritize countries to receive the doses of vaccine depending on their epidemiological situation and vulnerability. Moreover, within COVAX facility, there is a humanitarian crisis buffer. So COVAX facility will maintain certain amount of doses of vaccine to support countries who will get into suddenly very acute outbreak of COVID-19 or any other humanitarian crisis happen in this country. Within the country, each government will have to make a decision how to prioritize target groups and population for vaccination against COVID-19 at the initial stages, because definitely in the beginning there will not be sufficient supply of vaccine to vaccinate entire population. And WHO has a strategic advisory group on immunization that develop ethical values which WHO and countries should base their decision on prioritizing population. But SAGE also developed a roadmap on to support countries in prioritizing target groups, and their advice was given for different epidemiological situations and for different stages of vaccine supply. And at the initial stages of vaccine supply, for example, when vaccine is available to up to 10% of population, SAGE recommended to focus on preventing severe diseases and death and maintaining the most critical and essential services like healthcare service. And the advice from SAGE and also from our European Technical Advisory Group is to start vaccinating healthcare workers who are at high risk of acquiring infection and developing severe disease, but also at high risk of transmitting this infection to vulnerable patients who can develop severe disease or even die from COVID-19. ETAGE also, the second group which was recommended for this stage are older adults. And our European Technical Advisory Group established an age cutoff as 60 years of age. So ETAGE recommended to vaccinate everybody above age of 60. But each country should decide what should be their age cutoff based on the disease epidemiology, and also based on the availability of vaccine. But in any case, each country should start vaccinating from older ages and then moving towards younger ages until the cutoff is reached. One more advice from ETAGE was to include in this first stage the residents and staff of long-term care facilities, because these people are in very high risk of acquiring infection, and infection can be transmitted very quickly because they live together and have very close, and it's difficult to implement distance restrictions in such facilities.
Dr. Messina, do you have some updates regarding the approval of new vaccines? Are there some promising ones?
Yes, there are reasons to be optimistic, and there are more than 182 vaccines candidates in development right now that are using different platforms to develop vaccines, of which 73 are currently in clinical development and 14 vaccines are in phase 3 clinical trials. With regards to receiving WHO emergency use listing, you probably know that WHO pre-qualify vaccine to support access to these vaccines for low and middle income economies. And WHO also has this emergency use listing pre-qualification procedure which helps people to receive access to vaccine in emergency situations. And currently WHO already pre-qualified 2 vaccines, and actually 4 more vaccines will receive this emergency pre-qualification. and two of them are manufactured in China by Sinovac, Sinopharm, and one of them is Johnson Pharmaceutical Companies and Moderna vaccine. So these documents submitted by these manufacturers are right now reviewed by WHO pre-qualification team, and we expect their final decision from these teams on pre-qualification of this vaccine in March.
The last question is again from our audience. You are asked if the Russian and the Chinese vaccine has a chance to integrate the set of vaccines in the World Health European Organization region. Let's remind our audience that Russia is one of the ELPA members country.
As I already told, each vaccine that will be included or procured by COVAX facility and distributed to the countries should receive either WHO emergency use listing pre-qualification or emergency approval of stringent regulatory authority. And WHO evaluates all data from manufacturers who apply for emergency use listing as it comes in rolling submission without preferences, or provide feedback on completeness or gaps. And the decision on listing is based on availability of complete information to confirm safety, quality, and efficacy. And WHO also works with regulators from all regions in the assessment of vaccines under emergency use listing. And we are currently, as I told, in late stage assessment of Chinese and other vaccines. And many countries, including Russia, right now are in negotiations with the WHO pre-qualification team on obtaining emergency use listing, and currently there are negotiations that WHO can only speak about the attributes of specific products for which it has comprehensive data, and it is those processes that provide assurance on quality, safety, and efficacy.
Thank you, Dr. Mosina. Now just a quick break and then a little surprise. Stay with us. We are back with the ELPA Hot Topics dedicated to COVID-19 vaccination and liver disease. What a day! Thank you very much, everybody. We really appreciated the honesty of your questions and answers, the only way to be useful and have an impact. But apparently, this episode is not over yet. We have the last surprise guest. Please welcome Mrs. Cindy Weinbaum. Mrs. Weinbaum is a representative of ELPA member heads, the Israeli Association for the Health of the Liver, and the ELPA working group leader on rare liver diseases. She is the first person belonging to ELPA's family to be given the COVID-19 jab on December 27, 2020, in Tel Aviv as a part of the mass vaccination program. How did you welcome this? Did you feel worried or scared? Mrs. Weinbaum, do you have some second thoughts?
heard that the vaccination was going to be given out in Israel, I was a little hesitant. I was worried. I didn't know if I would be able to get it as a liver patient. And having certain medication, been taking certain medications, I didn't know. So after asking my hepatologist and asking my other physicians if I could get it, they said yes, and I ran to get it immediately. Yeah.
You're an advocate for patients' rights and a patient yourself. How and why could this vaccine be crucial for people living with liver disease?
First of all, our organization here and in Israel and in Europe, we all work with liver patients that are sick. We work with post-transplant patients, and everybody that has a disease. The COVID situation could be much, much worse for people that are ill than having the vaccination. I believe I've heard a lot about it, and I think that's the way it has to be done. And we work with our groups here also to get people vaccinated. We try to explain to them that this would be the best way to go.
Mrs. Weinbaum, thank you very much for sharing your experience. Now, to conclude this episode, I would like to address all of our guests. Is there any last thing you would say to people who are afraid to get vaccines? First, Professor Lazarus.
Yes, well, don't be afraid. Vaccines save lives. These are safe and highly efficacious vaccines. And importantly, tens of millions of people around the world have already been vaccinated in so many different settings of so many different ages with so many different health backgrounds. We've seen amazing effects. Some of it's already being documented in the peer-reviewed literature. Some of it's anecdotal, but we've seen figures across the world where vaccination rates are high or at least increasing, that severe cases are falling, hospitalizations are falling, mortality is falling. So vaccination is important for you as an individual, also for your family, for your friends, your community, your country, and now the entire world. Thank you.
Dr. Mosina, what do you think about this?
I think it's important to be vaccinated for everybody, but it's particularly important for the people who have chronic conditions that put them in high risk of developing severe disease. And I have not finished, but our strategic advisory group of experts and European technical group of experts told that this group should be prioritized for vaccination in stage 2. And people with a chronic liver disease were listed as the group of people who will develop severe disease in case of acquiring infection. And clinical trials for all vaccine that receive WHO emergency use listing or stringent authority NRA's approval, they all were tested in people during the clinical trials with chronic conditions, and they demonstrated safety in this group and efficacy in this group. That's why the vaccine will be efficacious and safe. Moreover, this vaccine has been rolled out. The vaccination started in December, so now we accumulated big experience of using these vaccines in real field, and vaccines demonstrated their safety first, and now we already have recently data that are published on the effectiveness of vaccine or impact of this vaccine in the country that managed to vaccinate significant proportion of population. And I know that recently this data we received from Israel and Scotland. So the data that the evidence that we have today and has are reassuring that vaccine is safe, is beneficial, and I wish I was able to get vaccinated myself and vaccinate my family, but I have to wait for my turn. But for the group of population that have been prioritized for vaccination in their countries, my strong advice to get vaccinated, to protect yourself against this severe disease. Thank you.
And Mrs. Weinbaum, you already got the vaccine. Your final thoughts about this experience?
Yeah, I think everybody that can get vaccinated should get vaccinated. As you've seen in Israel, more than 50% of the population here has been vaccinated already over the age of 16. And I think it's a very important thing for people with chronic liver disease and people over age of 60. They should all get vaccinated as soon as they possibly can.
I just wanted to thank all participants. I think it was extremely important to spread the message of hope to also liver patients regarding vaccination and to make sure that they know that the vaccines are safe and we are all keen on ending this pandemic soon. Thank you very much for your contributions. See you next time.
Thank you, everybody. It has been a pleasure having you, all of you, today. Thank you to all the people who follow us live today. Stay tuned. Hot Topics on Air will be back soon with an episode about the Europe's Beating Cancer plan. Thank you.